second reading today comes from the Gospel of Matthew. Indeed, this is a familiar text with perhaps a confusing message. This parable comes within a series of parables that Jesus tells as he nears his final days. This is part of a collection of parables on faithful waiting. And we can understand this lesson more than just a lesson on using your gifts and talents wisely, as is typically the answer. It is, as I see it, an encouragement to be faithful, persevering, and prepared for what the Bible, and especially Matthew's Gospel, presents as the final judgment. Central to this theology of God's righteous judgment is that we all are accountable to respond to God. This response, the expectation of an acceptance of God's mission as invited to participate by Jesus Christ. And this acceptance is a lifelong journey of faithful obedience to and trust in the Master. Now, if we were to read through the preceding parables in Matthew's Gospels, we would encounter this collection of lessons, all prefaced and connected by the warning of Jesus, therefore, be ready, for the Son of Man will come at an unexpected hour. First in this collection of parables, we encounter the lesson of the wise and faithful slave who is entrusted to care for the needs of the other servants as the master goes on a long journey. Blessing will come, we learn, when the master returns and finds him at work, caring for others. Harsh punishment, however, will be his reward if when the master unexpectedly returns, he finds him not about the master's business. Then follows the lesson of the 10 bridesmaids, 5 wise, 5 foolish, who are all told to wait expectantly for the bridegroom. Yet, as you can imagine by their name, the foolish are not ready, do not keep oil in their lamps, and when the bridegroom arrives, they were all locked out from the great banquet, unable to celebrate. Now, the parable that follows the one that we're about to read is the great judgment account we're familiar with, where the sheep are separated from the goats, and we learn from Jesus that whenever we do it to the least of these, we do it unto him. So for today, keep in mind the context of this series of lessons as we now turn to our selected reading for exploration. Again, the theme of the Master going on a journey, his return will be unexpected. Matthew chapter 25, beginning with verse 14. You can follow along in your own Bible or on the back of the bulletin. Jesus says, "For it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went, dug in the ground, and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master." I've omitted the last verses of this parable, but we're probably familiar with what occurs. The one who invested two and doubled that is greeted with the same response. "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master." Well, the one who had buried his master's money does not fare so well. We'll turn to him in time. Now, as with the other parables, in this collection especially, there is a distinction between a faithful response which elicits a reward and the unfaithful which deserves a punishment. We are introduced to two faithful servants, each entrusted with large portions of their master's estate, and each returned to their master a doubled investment. But on the other hand, there is this third servant, the servant the master calls wicked and lazy, for burying the wealth which was entrusted to him. And as is the point of most parables, there is a lesson to learn and encouragement to be good and faithful. But just what is this parable encouraging us to be faithful with? It's often preached as a stewardship message. God is entrusting to you a wealth of blessing, time, talent, and treasure. And what will you do with it? Will you bury it in a hole, afraid of losing what God gave you? Or will you make an investment and double your blessing and be rewarded with even more? Now, this is not an unfair reading of the parable. In fact, it's one that I've given personally myself and had, in fact, planned on presenting today to some degree. But I believe that there is something more going on here, something that I believe deserves a deeper look, something that I was surprised to see. As you know, a talent has a double meaning, especially back then. It was a value of money, but also understood as a gift or ability given by God. Now, monetarily, a talent was equal to 6,000 denarii, which is about 20 years' worth of wages. And the amount entrusted to each servant, 5 and 2 and 1, a significant amount. Even the one. Now, we're told each of these three servants were worthy of being trusted, had proved themselves to their master previously. Even, again, the servant to whom only one was given had the ability to do what the master was asking. Yet, regardless of his ability, regardless of the great trust in which the master had for this servant, did not accomplish what the master had intended. He's got excuses. He's got a defense. He even has the original sum, which he had preserved from depreciation. And he wipes the loose dirt off the bag and hands it back to the master. Not a cent has been lost. Yet that's not evidently what the master had intended. Now, if we take this parable, this lesson, out of its context of the other parables, we're left with a perplexing situation. We can't help but come to the defense of this so-called lazy servant. Is he really lazy? Or perhaps he's safe, prudent even. His own words accuse the master as a shrewd businessman, harsh, demanding, and it doesn't seem to be an unreasonable defense, for this is exactly how the master seems to behave. What he expects from his servants is to do the work of putting his wealth to work on his behalf without having to do the work himself, reaping where he does not sow. Well, fortunately, we not only have the luxury of context, the surrounding passages and parables, all with similar themes, we have the benefit of knowing the nature of the master. We know the storyteller, Jesus, and we know the master is always the hero of the story to whom we are all accountable. We know that we have a generous, grace-filled, good God who lavishes us with blessing and invites us to join him in the ministry and mission of the gospel. I have to be honest, I don't really know much about investments. I believe the stock market is quite confusing. I don't know at all how it works. I know enough, though, to not bury my weekly paycheck in the backyard. I do have a 403B. I contribute to my pension, employer matching. I have life insurance policies. I might not be wise, but I don't think I'm wicked and lazy about my investments. I had to do some research, of course, on the topic of investing for this sermon. If you have a sum that you want to quickly double, you might find an investment manager or someone who works in what is called the wealth management industry. Ask him or her what you have to do and the risks you're willing to take to double your money, and he or she will probably tell you something I'd never heard about, the rule of 72. Have you heard of this, the rule of 72? Well, if your investment has a guaranteed investment rate of, say, 5%, you divide that interest rate into 72, and the answer will be the number of years it will take to double your money. So, 5% into 72 equals 14 and a half years. You'll double your investment. Now, you have to also inquire about how risky this might be. And you'll learn that if you want to double your money that quickly, the risk is quite dramatic. And in the world of venture capital, only about 1 out of 4 or 5, or some say even 1 out of 10, makes it. And the other times you lose everything. So look at that third servant, the one to whom only 1 talent was entrusted. I don't know if you see it, but I don't think he's a bad man. He's prudent, careful, a cautious investor, not willing to take any chances with his master's money. It's all there, every penny, when his master returns. In fact, he's proud of himself. Here it is, all of it, safe and sound. Yet for his efforts, he is treated as harshly as anyone in the whole Bible. Consider for a moment, what if the first 2 servants had put their money in a high-risk venture and lost it all? Jesus didn't tell it that way. But how do you think it would have turned out for them? Some speculate and tend to agree. I cannot help but imagine that the master would not have been harsh toward them and might have even applauded their efforts. Because what if the point is not so much about the return, but about living a life of faithfulness, and knowing that faithfulness is not free of risk? I think the point here is not really about doubling the master's money and accumulating wealth. It's about living. It's about investing in faith. It's about taking risks. It's about Jesus himself and what he has done and what is about to happen to him. Certainly risky. And mostly it is about what he hopes and expects of his disciples after he is gone. So remembering that this parable is a story told by Jesus to his disciples, we are now invited to participate. It's not some distant, disconnected spectator, but as an invited Christ follower. This story is an invitation. Jesus invites us to be his disciples, to live our lives as fully as possible by investing them, by risking, by expanding the horizons of our responsibilities. To be Jesus' disciple, he says, is not so much believing ideas about him, but following and living life with him. It is to experience renewed responsibility for the use and investment of these precious lives of ours. It is to be bold. It is to be brave, to reach high and care deeply. So consider your life. Not necessarily your portfolio, but your life of faith, your whole, connected life. And what are you investing in? What have you been investing your life in? Are you a risk taker? Or are you living in fear? The response of that so-called wicked and lazy servant, he says, I was afraid, so I did nothing. I was afraid of risk, of losing, so I buried what you gave me in the ground. All too often, fear drives our lives, our generosity, our relationship, our faith. Too often, the fear of failure and risk can paralyze us into inaction. We're afraid to try in case we're rejected. Fear causes us to play things safe. Fear prevents us from taking risks. I believe there is a powerful insight here in this story for us to recognize. What is the sin? For what is that lazy servant admonished? For not being willing to risk, to try, to learn, to grow. The servants in this story are not put in some no-win scenario. They are encouraged to join the master in his work, to take the invitation, to risk, and are transformed from servant to partner in mission. Are you willing Are you willing to be a partner? Are you willing to make an investment in the work of the Master? The implications of this parable are numerous. The work that God is inviting you to be part of is full of possibility. And what's most significant is that whatever God is inviting you to participate in, God will equip you. God will give you the capital to invest. Whether it's creativity, whether it's imagination, innovation, the gifts of artistry, wisdom, ingenuity, perhaps industriousness, charisma, God has already made a deposit of wealth within you. Are you willing to use the gifts, talents, and abilities that God has created you to partner with Him in ministry? You're not being set up to fail. You've been equipped to succeed. If you're willing to risk, to grow, to learn, again, the implications are numerous. It's not just a stewardship message, although it certainly applies. I believe it's also an evangelism message, a discipleship message, a worship message, a mission message. That you are being invited to partner with God in kingdom work. To risk, to reach out and share God's love with each other. To grow, to welcome God's Spirit to transform your lives. To learn, to acknowledge that you have something to learn. And that God can teach you new ways, new directions, new lessons to be transformed from servant to partner. What have you been investing in? What has your life been an investment in? You're being set up. You're being equipped. You have been given a blessing of abilities, talents, gifts. Don't bury them. Step out. For God did not give us a spirit of timidity, but a spirit of power, of boldness. What are you willing to risk? God has risked it all in His Son, Jesus Christ, on your behalf, on behalf of this world. Will you join Him in that risk? A life of faith, a life of following, a life of love. It might be hard, it might be scary, but do not be afraid. For God goes with you each step of the way. Let us pray. O Master, let me walk with Thee. Let me follow each step of the way. For You have invited me to a journey, an adventure, a life full of faith, and yet it is full of risks. A risk that sometimes some of us are afraid of. But may we enter into a life of boldness, a willingness to grow, learn, and change, to inspire others and be transformed in our ministry with You. You've given each of us all that we need, and to each of us have different gifts, not like the one next to us. And in fact, together, with our variety and diversity of gifts, we can accomplish anything that You put to our tasks. So may we together be the church, the body of Christ for this broken world. May we be not afraid to invest in this community, our neighbors, and all that You'll bring into our